key event in our agenda, which is the presentation by Anatoliy Chubais. Anatoly Borisovich, you are having two hats today, because we all remember that you effectively created the foundation of today's power industry when you were the person in charge of it about 10 years ago. So the current renewable energy, because that was when those first pillars were put in place. So today you are busy with the technologies, which to me seems also creates a lot of momentum and progress for this nation's economy. So what are we going to expect in the future, please? Thank you. Thank you for such an introduction. I've been attentively listening to what esteemed Mr. Amin was saying, who is very well known in this world and globally as an expert, and I made a conclusion to myself. Speaking about the renewable energy globally, apparently one may say that the discussion of it in terms of either for or against, has come to an end. It is not anymore. It is the matter of the past now. And you can see that in terms of the basic figures, in terms of the commissioning capacities, which in 2014 was greater than in the rest of the industry, in terms of the general attitude. And today's panel, Mr. Amin, where we had the president of Russia, and the head of OPEC, and the head of the gas exporting countries forum, and the head of the renewables globally, Mr. Amin. So all the T's have been crossed. It is clear. Now let's go back to the motherland. What is going on here in this area? Well, I should say that we were preparing ourselves for today's event very seriously, and we wanted to try and be daring enough to talk about a systemic and historic report about what is the Russian renewable energy. Where does it come from? What it is all about? What it would look like tomorrow. I know I have to stick to the timing, and I will do my best not to get out of it, but we cannot but share with you our common understanding of this topic. So basically, the title of this presentation, The Renewable Energy in Russia from the Past into the Future. And I would like, in this presentation of mine, to touch upon three issues, particularly if I manage to flip the slides. Yes, I can. So first of all, tell you about the system for support for the renewable energy, about the way it was being developed and what it is made up of. Then to tell you which kind of markets have evolved as a result. I haven't seen yet the full integrity kind of a look at it, so there are things that we can share with you, and then look into the future and talk about what kind of economic and technological strategies of promoting ourselves in this area do exist and can be utilized in the immediate future. So starting from history, we believe that the whole system of support for the renewables in Russia can easily be split into three stages. The first one, 2007, when basically the law came out, the law on the power, electricity, the federal law number 35, and what is important, that was not the first draft, but the second draft. That was the subject of a lot of heated debate, but which truly created the foundation in the form of the wholesale market in order to build upon it the whole system for the support of the renewables. Now, the second step from that legislative basis, the most comprehensive system of measures for the support of the renewables was developed, and as of 2015, finally, out of this whole huge paper legal construction, something living started getting out of. I mean, the real renewable energy in the whole country. Now, a couple of words about each stage and what transpired. I remember very well in 2007 a very heated debate in the US of Russia when we were preparing ourselves to introduce this law in terms of what kind of the base source should be put into the government support system for the renewables. Should it be the government budget or the wholesale market, which we were actually trying to develop then? And I can tell you straight that very respected colleagues which stood behind the wholesale market, and that was a multi-year, very intricate and complex effort, were against it, saying that it would be more proper to incentivize the renewables energy from the budget and don't be a deterrent to this young and aspiring market by any sort of special measures. But I was convinced then that, unfortunately, understanding the way the budgetary process usually works and the way the lobbying structure, in the good sense of it, looks, if we are to rely upon this mechanism, Russia will never see a strong coalition sufficient enough in order to have the budget invest serious resources necessary to support the renewables energy. Life proved me to be right. And that was exactly the base. I mean, the wholesale market, then during the second stage, where exactly what we're going to talk about appeared, and I mean the whole system for the support of the renewable energy, although one should admit that one had to pay a dear price for it, something that we are being very much blamed for, because we're justifiably being told that the decision to have the wholesale market as the basis for the development of the renewables is worth something. Yes, it is worth something, and we're very well aware of it. Within the next 15 years, it will be in between 0.5 to 6.1% of the markup on the price to the end industrial user. This is the price. It would be wrong to say that it is insignificant, but in my understanding, this is a very much common sense kind of a price which is worth paying in order to launch the whole project. And so on that base, the second stage started being done. I mean, creating the mechanism of support. And during the second stage, we dealt with two tasks. The first one was to have the kind of financial support which would provide for a competition between the market players for the sake of minimizing the price. And the second task was to provide for the kind of conditions in Russia in order to localize respective manufacturing processes in Russia. Now, how did we go about these two tasks? Well, if I would have been the guy to irritate everybody, I would have started reading out all of the government decrees that were in sequence, and Alexei would definitely be crying, crocodile tears, and just telling us, the way it all happened, 11 government decrees, and multiple Minister of Energy edicts, and this is the whole pile, not just of an empty paper, but of the legal environment which created the solution of the two tasks that I've just mentioned. Now, what kind of decisions those were and what they were made up of. The base for the whole of the system for the support of the renewables are the capacity allocation contracts. And that is the most important mechanism effective in the wholesale market. And I believe that in a very adequate ways, our colleagues from the Ministry of Energy decided to apply in order to grow the support system out of it. It is quite competitive, which is fundamentally important. And so today, around the additional capacity contract tenders, this whole discussion is taking place and this whole work. And so Alexei Texler, in his introductory word, mentioned competition. And I will describe what you just mentioned through real facts. Now, look at the wind. In 2016, the declared marginal price, marginal capex per megawatt was 136,000. Effectively, there was no competition in place, and that was the first real tendering for the wind energy, which took place without any competition. However, already this year, we really ended up having a very serious competition because we had 123 quoted as a price, which was less than last year's 136. And around that 123, everything was going on in a very turbulent way. As a result, we, Rosnano, together with our partners from Fortnum, in order to win, we had to reduce the price by 17%. NL reduced its price by 25%. Our colleagues from Rosatom also reduced the price, but not sufficiently, because 7% reduction led to only half of their applications being accepted. Half was not. But that is a normal, honest competition. And so in this sense, I would like to say, Mr. Texas, that the whole mechanism of tendering in as far as wind energy is concerned this year proved to be appropriate and very competent in terms of the results that we can see, not in all of the industries and not as of the first year, but step by step, this whole machinery starts working as it should. So that was the first task. Second task was localization. So there are well-known requirements in terms of the share of localization for the base industries. In sun generation, it was to be 50, then 70. Well, everything is all right with it as far as we know. Wind generation, stage by stage, growth from 55 to 65, and in waste, utility waste processing, 75. But I would need to make one caveat here. Roughly speaking, as far as the world is concerned, the urban waste treatment is not renewable energy kind of thing, of application. We understand it quite well. But in Russia, it happened in such a way that the whole of the mechanism for the support of this sector grew out of the same base, out of the same electricity law in a wholesale market, additional capacity contract, and formally, I believe, as far as the article in number 35 in the law, potentially this can be treated as the renewable energy in terms of the waste treatment. So without arguing about terminology, I would like in this way to prevent possible criticism. And in this presentation, I would mean this particular part of the sector, I mean the waste processing and management as part of the renewables, in a conditional way. So what evolved out of it today? What is the actual state of the whole of the project of the renewable energy as of right now? And here upon the slide, if you take a close look, it is very important for me also to see what is written at the top of it and what is at the left side of this chart. Because you see stages, and that is very important. Stage number 1, allocation of capacities. Stage number 2, building stations. Third, building factories which produce machinery and equipment for such station. Number 4, technological upgrade on the basis of Russian know-how, which is the key, very important stage. I will refer to it later. And the next stage is exports. So, and as far as the sun energy is concerned, we've passed through all of it. I mean, those present here, in person, Mr. Chubais, who is the general director of one of our companies, can describe it as a novel which wouldn't leave anybody indifferent. And within the next few weeks, we will be able to pass through the last fifth square, and we'll get to the exports. We are nearing it, and indeed, we are in the possession of the Russian products, which are very much competitive in terms of exports. As far as the wind energy is concerned, we went through the take-off contracts. We are moving towards the construction of the power stations, and we'll move through the contractual side. Now, the very last part, in terms of the processing, we are moving. So altogether, that constitutes about 45% from the overall project. But most importantly is that there is a track already which was laid, along which this locomotive is going to drive us. That very same third stage, under the name of the real launching in real figures. So you see here the statistics of the launches, which practically coincide with what we've just heard from Mr. Texler. In 2016, that was 185 megawatts. In 2017, 304, and so on and so forth. And if you pay attention that this is not cumulative figure, this is annual figures, cumulative results would have looked in a much more impressive way. This is what we currently have in the law, and based upon my conviction, absolutely realistic result, because this is what we actually see in terms of the Russian renewable energy industry becoming the fact. Now, what kind of markets are there as a result? What kind of size they have? What kind of scale they have? I believe that there are two base markets, if you simplify the picture. The first one is generation itself. I mean to say that the market of the new capacities in power, in the sun energy, we're talking about approximately 1.7, wind 335, but altogether, and on top of it also the waste processing, this is about 6 gigawatt that we're talking about. The rest of the marketplace by now have made up their minds. It so happened that in the sun energy, together with partners, Hugh Valley, we are in control of 67% of the market. It so happened that the wind energy is where we're also partners, where player number 1, Rosnano, has the biggest amount of additional capacity contracts, which it's won together with Fortum. And in waste processing, not long ago, actually this morning, I signed an agreement on setting up a partnership where, together with Rostech being one of the partners, we're fully into this market. So 100% of it we are in control of, although this is just the beginning of the whole story, not the end of it. Now, the second market, not less important. This is not energy. This is machine building. This is developing factories to produce machinery for each of these sectors. In the sun energy, the amount of investments already, in terms of the tenders which took place, 175. In the wind energy, about 265. And in waste processing, 127. But I would like to argue, Alexei Leonidovich, because you stated 600 billion, and as far as the one contracts are concerned, but we already see that in our business plans, in our assessments, not 650, a little bit more than that, And 750 in the tenders, which already took place. As was correctly stated, there is one last gigawatt is remaining, which is going to be tendered within the next few years. But in this way, we're talking about the kind of investment project which is worth from 900 billion up to 1 trillion rubles. I do not know of anything comparable in the economy of this country. Maybe I missed out on something. Maybe not. I'm talking about a colossal investment project which is happening right in front of our eyes and becoming a set of real plants and factories and power stations. So the specialty of this whole project is that it creates very special investment case, simply because of the fact that the basic additional capacity contracts are there, and we know that they have the guaranteed profitability for 15 years to come. So in the mind of a financier, this is an almost fixed income instrument. So in this sense, this kind of an instrument is very easy to be augmented with the lending, because in wind we see the potential for 280 billion rubles of loans. We're currently playing a tender which the leading banks of the country are part of, and we're going to select the strongest one, particularly my friend German Gref from Sberbank, who said that wind is something that you can only find in your pockets. Well, I believe that he doesn't know that his subordinates in Sberbank are trying to compete against others, trying to give us a loan for this project. And this is my response to government, which I promised to give. I cannot pass this opportunity, really. So this is the specificity of the investment case as of right now. Now, let's take a look at tomorrow. In any strategies, the fundamentally important category is the network parity. That is the base of the basis to understand what are the renewables. We all know that the technological upgrade in the renewable energy takes very fast pace, and actually President Putin today said that there is a technological upgrade in the internal combustion engine, where from 12 liters was switched over to 8. He's absolutely correct. I cannot argue against the President. I fully agree with everything that the President stated. However, there is one little thing, which is that the potential of the technological upgrade in the renewables energy is much greater than the potential of technological upgrading in the traditional conventional energy. Take my word as an old energy guy, hydro energy, you will never see a revolution in it. In the gas energy, the steam gas cycle is a very powerful, very strong story with the utility ratio up to 58–60%. And that is it. In the coal energy, what is he suckling in a fire bed? Okay, but 36, well, 38%, no revolution, neither in coal, neither in the coal energy, coal-based energy, neither in the gas-based energy. Well, maybe super, extra, critical mass may give us additional 2 to 3% in the utility ratio. That's it, physical limit, as opposed to sun, as opposed to wind, where the potential is humongous. And a whole number of countries has already come through that network parity, and you see them listed on this slide. Russia will join this group later because of a whole number of reasons, but this slide for Russia, as we counted, starting from 2026 up to 2029, Russia will go through the network parity in as far as all generation types are concerned, which means that the renewables will become the most profitable area. So the government strategy in this area should be developed based on the understanding of this. How should it look like? It should look in the following way. As of right now, we are going through the additional capacity contract stage, and that is a very powerful and a working means which is currently at work and which, as far as I understand, was very necessary during the first stage. Now, during the second stage, something that the debate is going on about, very seriously, I'm convinced that it would be very much incorrect to give up on this, because this baby is not yet fully walking. It is just a toddler. And so if we talk about the second stage, if we talk about the additional capacity contract concept, which is supposed to be adopted by the end of the year, so I'm convinced that within this particular concept, the renewed additional capacity contracts should see some of the renewable staying in it, but the additional industrial policy elements should be added to it. Now, the third stage is where you don't need to have any additional capacity contracts. You don't need to have any special conditions on the wholesale market. You simply need to undertake measures for the support of exports, to support consumers, because you should enter into, from the consumer side, particularly the micro generation that Mr. Texler mentioned. This is a very important whole separate set of issues. So for the government, through very soft correcting action, the government will be able to take this whole project up to its finite stage. In my understanding, we're in a transition from the first to the second, and this is a very common sense kind of story. Now, about technological strategy, if we go from the economy into technology, I've described here an example of what we do, because you mentioned Jaurès Alférov, and very correctly, because his Nobel Prize was the hydrostructures, basically exactly what we're currently producing from the Hiver company, because it's the first Russian hydrostructural panel. And as everybody knows, we started out from what was 100% technology transfer. We simply took the Oerlikon technology with the Oerlikon equipment from Switzerland and simply put it into the Heval shell in the Republic of Czechoslovakia. Even that, in my life, that was one of the most difficult technological projects. It took us a lot of time. It was very difficult to do it. But alongside with that, in St. Petersburg, in the Physics and Technical University, we set up an R&D center that we invested 1,600,000,000 rubles, a lot of money, with the task to develop a new model of the product. And as they say, you may laugh at it, but that is exactly what we were able to do. This new model, the new hydrostructural panel, which was something that Mr. Chubais was able to start producing as of the April of the year, with the utility ratio from 9%, we raised it up to more than 22, and in terms of the cells, 22, a little bit less than that throughout the whole panel, and so respectively, that was top 3 in the world. Top 3 in the world, which means that we've got all of the necessary capacities to start deploying ourselves export-wise, and that is exactly the technology should develop. Step number 1, technology transfer. Step number 2, Russian upgrade. And step number 3, export. So in terms of the sun energy, we are entering into the third stage. In terms of the wind generation, into the fund that we're setting up together with Fortum, we already have set it up, 30 billion worth. Apart from the task of building the wind generation farms and producing the machinery for it, we are also creating the venture kind of fund so that inside the wind energy there will be a Russian technology upgrade coming up with the potential of exporting equipment from Russia. And I believe that this kind of the augmentation of the economic strategy creates the finite construction, both in as far as the wind, the sun, and the hard waste processing is concerned. So all put together, it means that as of today, Russia has launched this national bank for the creation of the renewable energy irreversibly. During the last forum, I wouldn't have sounded so decisively, but today I believe that everything is in place for me to say that. So as part of this project, we are establishing 3 sectors in the energy industry: wind, sun, and hard waste processing. But apart from the energy, there come 3 different types of machine building, each of which is linked to its own sector. Secondly, which is not least important, Russia creates all of the necessary prerequisites to add up to the Paris Accords that the President mentioned today. And that is also an important thing to bear in mind, because we're talking about reducing the CO2 emissions in the amount of more than 7 million tons, which is a very serious figure considering the fact that we need to do so much. Thirdly, the common sense strategy in this area realistically can push Russia into the team of major exporters of this particular equipment. And this is quite an elite class, and we're quite capable of getting into it, which is proved by the work we did in as far as the sun cluster is concerned. Fourthly, I guess I won't be able to show you the fourthly thing. So take my word for it in terms of what will happen in the fourthly stage. No, it works. So fourthly, apart from whatever I've just mentioned, there is a scaling effect of this whole project which projects itself beyond the renewables and the energy. And that applies to macroeconomics, because the project, which is in the size of $1 trillion, it's a serious story. And all of our understanding shows that in terms of the GDP growth rate, that is in between 0.1% to 0.5% annual growth throughout this whole period. Annual growth, throughout this whole period. It's about dozens of thousands of jobs, billions into the consolidated national budget. This is a large-scale order placed for the scientific operators who understand what needs to be done, and that is exactly what happened already. That is additional work for the educational system, because in Ulyanovsk University there is a department for wind energy that has been set up. We're talking to other education institutions to do the same. This is a quality breakthrough by this country against the backdrop of not some very optimistic situation in the economy, but wherever we see it, it would be incorrect not to mention it. And that is exactly what I would like to finish my presentation with. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You mentioned a very important figure, the parity in Russia. The energy parity is going to take place around 2026, you said. My question, in your opinion, what is the share of renewables we will have reached by then? I think I'll take it a bit wider, if that's okay. I think that we must take into account the following. Russia is incredibly rich in hydrocarbons. But let us distance ourselves from this stupid notion that hydrocarbons choke renewables. Sorry, wrong forum, but this is what the journalists have just been asked me about. So I'm still replying, I guess. Hydrocarbons are wealth of this country. We must use it in a correct manner. That means two things. Firstly, does that mean that we shouldn't have started on renewables? Of course not. Of course not. Thanks goodness we managed to hop on that train, if you know what I mean. But on the other hand, does that mean that we have to get to renewable levels similar to advanced countries? No, I say no, it doesn't. Germany is very proud because in some of its regions the share of renewables is 60%. That's splendid. Well done, Germany. But that is a result of some strange decision which was made a while ago to shut down all nuclear power plants. In France, nuclear accounts for 80%. And let me tell you why I say this. By 2028, I don't see that there is a task to make 100% of Russian energy renewables. That's not what I mean. And energy mix is a very subtle thing, you know. So in terms of figures, I guess, well, Norman parameters by 2028/2030, in terms of shares, would be around 6 to 7%. But that would mean colossal, huge amounts. Yes, of course. Go right ahead.
And I think the vision he's projecting, fully agree with. But Alexei mentioned that we did a study, and we did a lot of work based on the statistics that exist with the Russian ministry and with their experts. And our projection is by 2030, you mentioned about 6-7% by 2026. Our projection was that by 2030, you could feasibly have 11.3% renewables final consumption.
2030, 11.3.
Yeah. And that was also based on an assumption that we could reach 30% power generation from renewables by 2030. So all that you're talking about in the power sector, we feel is completely achievable, but we also feel that there is a need to look at another source, because if you are able to develop a rational energy policy, it has to be based on a complete assessment of what resources you have. And you're right, hydrocarbons are the wealth of this country, but you have other wealth, and you have to look at what is the business case for that wealth, and we believe that there's a tremendous potential in bioenergy, and we've been discussing this with Alexei and his colleagues. And we believe that we need to look into the potential of bioenergy as a major source for energy for the future on a cost-effective and sustainable basis, and we think that's a real possibility in Russia.
Можно я соединю цифры?
Yes, let me put figures together, if that's okay. 20%, 30% by 2030. Is that correct? In the energy mix.
Electricity 30%. And
By 2030.
Total, by 2030, and total final 11.3%.
Да, ну давайте посмотрим в
Yes, right, you are. But let us now talk at the power balance, 30% by 2030 for the entire world. That's very important. What's our starting point for us to be on the same page? Mr. Texler mentioned 6 GW. That makes 3%, I guess, in Russia. What 30% by 2030, how much would that make? That would be around 20 gigawatts, GW. 20 GW versus 6 GW in between 2024 and 2030. No, boys and girls, that's not feasible. in your language, if the world wants to have 30%, then I guess Russia by 2030 will have to have reached somewhere around 15%. That would be more than adequate. Well, that would be a science fiction growth rate for renewables.
I'm speaking only about the
Хорошо, но мы проверим это.
Yes, well, splendid. We'll check upon that in 2030 and we'll get back to you. Thank you so very much. It was most informative. Now I'd like to present my arguments, Mr. Chubais. You mentioned 150 MW. What is 150 megawatts? These days, because, well, 10 gigawatts, they commission it before breakfast. So 150 gigawatts, about 67% you mentioned when you talked about the Hevel market. That's very conservative, I guess. So, what about the remaining 30%? Yes, I'll be quite frank with you. As we speak these days in the solar market, in the beginning of October, the solar systems something company. Wait a second. That company is just about to commission yet another plant. It's a private company, a Russian investor and a Chinese investor. Well, their plant capacity is 100 MW, and they are going to manufacture monosilicon panels. And we are the government. Well, we are the government. So that is. But private business is following in our tracks, which proves that the government, who we usually pick, but that is a proof that the government has made a breakthrough and the private business is following. Yes, that is indeed so if we talk about solar modules. But if we talk about the manufacturing of solar cells, then the situation is slightly different, as you and I are well aware. Alexei, do you want to add something? Yes, well, this is a heated discussion indeed, but we are a northern country. Let's not forget about that. We need heat too, not just power. And I guess I'm going to agree with the figures cited by Mr. Chubais. And indeed, we know the figures cited by IRENA in their report, in their forecast. They have some hypothetical things, but nonetheless, in addition to other things, we must understand that electricity and heat, they cost money. So we must not throw anything and everything to boost technology progress. There is another component people care about. They don't care about the source of energy, be that coal or solar or gas. All they care about is electricity. And, well, gas price is subject to regulations in this country, of course. So we have taken a calm stand in this area and understand that the support program, as Mr. Chubais rightfully pointed out, well, the processes have been launched. And now, it's up to businesses, depending on, a situation in economics. Businesses will respond. Let us not pursue gigawatts. That's not the task. We need to develop competencies. And if we become world's largest manufacturer of solar panels, yet we will consume only a minimum part of that, believe you me, it will be more than reasonable for the country. Because otherwise we would have to search high and low worldwide for solar panels, and the entire country will have to pay for that. So let's have realistic tasks. Let's base our work on forecasts that we have, and let's up until 2024. That's support measures. Yes, we are talking about a new capacity delivery agreement for heat plants primarily, but I guess in the near future we'll make another decision. And there is a niche for renewables. I agree in the process, but we must understand that beyond 2024, economics will have to work in a more efficient manner in terms of selection of people. But this is what our current assumptions are. The current level of technical development, technology development, and we think that's fairly realistic. But we can always update our forecasts if there are, well, batteries sufficient to store gigawatts worth of power and capable of competing with the backup generation. Yes, indeed, the market of electrical machines can have an impact on this process because the need for liquid fuel will drop and more generation will be loaded during night hours and the entire balance may change. So we are going to opt for evolution rather than revolution here. So it's not worthwhile to argue about percentage share by 2030. Yes, of course, right, you are. Hevel, can we